Reading this morning comes from the book of Luke. The angel Gabriel has already visited Mary, offering her the invitation to participate in God's work, telling her that she has been chosen to bear the child of God. She has received this news and she has responded, "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." The angel departs, and she, shortly thereafter, sets off to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who is also pregnant at this point with the child who will become John the Baptist. When she greets her, Elizabeth's child responds in her womb, leaping at the voice of Mary, the mother of the Lord. And Mary responds then with her song of praise that has become known as the Magnificat, which is because of the Latin word for the third word in her prayer. "My soul magnifies." These are her words. "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. For he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and his descendants forever." The good news of Jesus Christ. Amen. When I was growing up, It's a Wonderful Life was a fixture in our holiday preparations in getting ready for Christmas. Through some strange licensing thing I don't quite understand, like anybody could broadcast it. Do you remember that? I don't know if the loophole has closed or something has changed, but at that point, WTTW and WGN were running it at various times, WYCC, if you could get that station, and NBC. Everybody ran It's a Wonderful Life. It was on a constant loop at our house, except for the times when we were watching White Christmas or Charlie Brown Christmas, or the Claymation Christmas we saw part of at 9:07. This was the rotation. My favorites as a child, of course, were the various animated specials, but it was well known in our household that Frank Capra's classic film was my father's favorite. It was on such a constant loop that there are scenes that I could visualize without even knowing what was actually going on. I could see the floor splitting and folks falling and diving into the pool at the school graduation party. I could picture the pharmacist, Mr. Gower, in his anguish following the news of his son's death as he almost made a fatal mistake had George Bailey, his young assistant, not come to his aid and intervened. I remembered these images more than anything about the plot, but I realized how very little I actually recalled of it when I sat down to watch it this week. I had forgotten the way that Harry kind of gently sexually harasses their live-in maid. I had forgotten or perhaps never seen the way that Mary and George first realize, or she's known for years, but when George first realizes his sort of the way that he's drawn to her, they're both on the phone with her intended suitor, talking to him from wherever he's off being rich and marvelous and partying somewhere, and they're holding the phone together and just are sort of overcome. It's this deeply romantic moment. These different things hit us when we see them at different ages. Obviously, at this point, those are the things that I pick up on. In this season of our community and our nation's life, obviously, Harry's behavior and their treatment of the housekeeper are the things that stand out to me initially. And yet, for all the things that have changed in our public perceptions of what is appropriate in a movie, this is nevertheless a wonderful story of a wonderful life. And I wondered, as I tried to think before having watched it again, what made it a Christmas story other than taking place on Christmas Eve, or having it reach its dramatic conclusion at Christmas Eve. And it is, now having seen it, truly a Christmas story, for it illustrates the kinds of reversals that are at the heart of the Christmas story and that are at the heart of Mary's words that we heard just now. Now, I love the Christmas story as much as anyone, and certainly the rendering of it that come in Matthew and in Luke, but I also love the ways that it has been interpreted and retold through song and story throughout the years. I especially love the ways in which some modern poets take up the various characters of the story and try to, as poets only can, place themselves in the story. One poem in particular spoke to me as I thought about this reversal that Mary speaks of. This poem is by a woman named Lucy Shaw. She's Canadian, I believe, and I think an Anglican. It seemed too much to ask of one small virgin that she should stake shame against the will of God. All she had to hold to later were those soft inward flutterings and the remembered surprise of a brief encounter. Who would think it more than a dream wish? An impossible, implausible, laughable defense. And it may seem much too much to ask me to be part of the risky thing, God's shocking, unconventional, unheard of thing, to further heaven's hopes and summon God's glory. I do a fair number of weddings here and certainly have over the course of my ministry career. And whenever I meet with couples to plan the service, I talk about the ways in which you want the music and the liturgy and the readings you pick to reflect who you are and what you want your marriage to kind of be about, what you believe marriage is about, and what you hope for in your partnership. I was certain that I wanted my friend Shonda to sing a song at our wedding. I just didn't know which one she should sing. And I tried a million. Josh vetoed everything, obviously, because none of them were right. And ultimately, she wrote us this fantastic song. It was lovely. And I've been trying for these many years to get her to actually give me a copy of it. But one of the songs that I floated is a Warren Zevon song. He's awesome, right? And it wasn't Werewolves of London, though. It was Don't Let Us Get Sick, Don't Let Us Get Old. And I love this song. It felt almost like a prayer. Don't let us get sick, don't let us get old, don't let us get stupid, all right? And I brought that to a premarital counseling session with the pastor who was going to marry us, and she vetoed it. She's like, no, you can't have that because those things are going to happen. You're going to get sick, and you're going to get old, and you're probably going to get stupid. So no, you can't have that song. But she, she laughed at us in her lovely way. She laughed at me. But it is hopeful, right? To hope, and when you're getting ready to get married, you can't imagine that anything terrible will ever happen. You can't imagine that hardship will come to you. And it's funny because, when you meet with couples, you always try to tell them, part of being married, part of these vows is that you're vowing to be together through these things that will certainly come. And yet, it is right and good to hope that you won't have to face too much too soon. It seemed too much to ask of a young woman in Nazareth to face possible shame, to take this risk to bear a child. I was struck watching It's a Wonderful Life by many things, the first of which was the day that George, who has dreamed forever of going off to see the world, and at each moment in his life, he is drawn back into Bedford Falls. Each moment when he is prepared to go off to college or go on his trip to Europe, he is called back. First, his father dies, and the only way they can save the building and loan from Mr. Potter taking it over and shutting it down is for George to stay and lead it. He and Mary finally marry, and they have their wedding, and they're in the cab. They're counting their $2,000 that they have scrimped and saved, and they're ready to go to New York for a week and then somewhere else, and they don't even know. They can't wait. George has been dreaming of seeing the world forever. They're in the cab, and they notice people starting to run to the building and loan. There is a run on the bank. We remember, of course, that this movie takes place, at least part of it, before the FDIC insured all the accounts, right? So if people were afraid that the money couldn't back up your loan or your account, then they would come and try to take out all the money. So someone had come, they had insufficient funds in the bank itself to cover everyone. Everyone tried to withdraw. And George gets the news that if they can't keep the bank open until 6 o'clock, then all is lost. So they're standing there trying to figure out what to do. George is trying to talk everyone down, and Mary holds up their honeymoon cash and says, I have some money. They start doling it out. The first person withdraws $240, all the money in his account. But from then on, folks start responding. I just need $20. I just need 20. A blessed soul comes forward and says, I just need $17.50. Through everyone coming together, they are able to make it, and the bank, of course, is saved, and George's work in the community continues. It's too much to ask of excited young newlyweds who have never left their hometown, who have dreamed of seeing the world, to give up everything they have worked so hard for other people, to calm the fears of others. And yet, they do not hesitate. I was curious because, of course, before I watched it, I had read the Wikipedia page, and so I knew, the basic plot outline, but it was interesting to me because I assumed that George had just sort of fronted the money. So it was interesting actually watching it that it was Mary who had volunteered it. And I appreciated that he would not have volunteered it on her behalf, or perhaps he wasn't ready to let it go, but that she had come forward. It's fitting, of course, in this sermon that his bride's name is Mary. It is too much to ask to participate in the work of the gospel in some ways, and yet that is what we are called to do. In Mary's song, though, she does not, in the actual Bible, she does not condemn God. She does not offer her anger or frustration that she has been called forward to take this risk. But she, in fact, praises God for all that the Lord has done. You have raised up the lowly. George's story is one of frustration in many ways. He has longed to live a certain kind of life. He has been a big dreamer who promises to lasso the moon, to go all over the world and build things, to make a mark on the world, to see an adventure. In every monologue, at various points, he's listing different cities he's going to visit. And he never gets the chance. He is mocked for this, both his circumstances and the ways in which he responds to them, by Mr. Potter, the villain of the film. Your father was a fool. Look at you, always extending yourselves for others. You don't have a dime to your name. You are a fool. And yet, of course, the story is that God makes good out of our foolishness. The meek are lifted up. There is strength in self-sacrifice and risk-taking. George, at every opportunity, does not simply roll over to his circumstances, does not just lay down and watch life happen to him. He makes choices. He chooses to set aside his dreams to save his father's business, and not simply to save his father's legacy or to protect his father's name, but he gives an impassioned speech to the board of directors of the building and loan. He points out that Mr. Potter's interest in owning the town is for Mr. Potter's benefit. He is a slumlord, right? He owns all of these tenement apartments. He keeps people living in poverty. The building and loan offers people, regular working class people, an opportunity to own their own home. The sign of freedom, the sign of stability in this historical moment. And George not only becomes a part through the building and loan of loaning people money, but also in starting to build a community of beautiful little homes in which people can build their lives and dreams. Through his commitment to not gouge the working class, but to support them, George changes the community. He and Mary live in a blustery old house that she wallpapers and repairs, although it's still, windy upstairs in the attic. And every time he comes up the front stairs, and he holds his hand at the end of the banister, and the piece comes up with him, right? The house is always in need. A moment comes that George reaches his breaking point. Through no fault of his own, scatterbrained Uncle Billy has lost $8,000, and now the building and loan is under investigation. They don't have the money, the books looked cooked, everything is terrible. And George breaks down. He yells at Uncle Billy. He goes home and picks a fight with his wife, with his children. His son excitedly says, "Did you see the neighbor's new car?" And George says, "What's wrong with our car?" He who has made his life in choosing to sacrifice his own dreams, his own well-being for others, starts to wonder if he is indeed a fool. He wonders if it might have been better if he had never been born. He goes to Mr. Potter, his longtime adversary, and begs for a loan to continue to serve the community. And Mr. Potter laughs at him. "You have no collateral. You're worth nothing." He has only a life insurance policy worth $15,000. Mr. Potter laughs once more. "You're worth more dead than alive." This sends George to the bridge, where indeed he meets Clarence. I had forgotten this point too, that when George is ready to throw himself into the river, Clarence does it first. Clarence jumps in first. Clarence, his guardian angel who is sent to show him, to save his very life. And George, being George, jumps in and saves the angel. In each moment of decision, in each moment where it is too much to ask, George responds. He is meek, he is lowly, he is the servant of God. Clarence, of course, then continues to show George what the world would be like if he had never been born. His brother Harry would have died, and years later, a whole transport of men fighting in World War II would have been killed because Harry would not have been alive to save them. The pharmacist would have accidentally, in his grief, poisoned a child and gone to prison for manslaughter. His mother would be widowed and childless, disappointed by the world and always living in fear. Countless members of the community would not have had the blessing, the wonderful lives that they had known because of the support, the intervention, the presence of this good and humble man. We often think of the call of God as some great adventure that we are called to embark upon. We think of faith as, well, as the last time I preached, as Indiana Jones, right? Walking off the cliff, right? We think that that's the test of faith. But Frank Capra shows us through the life of George Bailey that the life of faith, the call of the gospel, is lived in individual moments where we choose the good of others, the good of community, the good of the powerless over our own desire for stability or wealth, sometimes even over our own dreams. The word of Mary, however, is that there is glory in this sacrifice. Even in these small moments over time, these begin to change the world. Humble lives shifting the world through doing the work of God. As Mike alluded to, this Advent season, and particularly as we're celebrating it now with sort of our classic Christmas, we're singing all these carols, even though it's still only the third Sunday of Advent, and we've been doing them for weeks. We are in that already not yet moment that theologians speak of, in which we know the work of God has already begun, even as we wait for that moment in which God's presence is fully realized in the birth of Jesus. We wait for the reversal. Throughout the ages, we long to see it. We long to know that God's justice is here. We long for the day in which the broken-hearted will be healed, will know joy again. We wait for the time in which those who take joy in crushing others will be taken down a peg, in which the proud will be scattered from their thrones. We wait, and yet we already see the reversal. By the end of the film, George Bailey, who has been poor his whole life, is toasted by his brother, the war hero, returned from Washington, D.C. He is toasted to George Bailey, the richest man in town. He heeds Clarence's words, "No man is a failure who has friends." Even in a moment of desperation, George is surrounded by signs of the affection, the loyalty, the blessing of his community that he has worked so hard to serve. Now they have come forward to bear witness to him. We wait. We hope. We look for the reversal. We look forward with anticipation. I love, as I said, words of poets, particularly in this season. Here is one more from Madeleine L'Engle, and I offer her words in particular, one, because she closes this sermon nicely, but also because she wrote a book that we're going to be looking at a little bit more in Lent, A Wrinkle in Time. But in addition to being a wonderful children's book author, she's an Episcopalian poet and writer who writes wonderful things about the life of faith. This poem is called First Coming. God did not wait till the world was ready, till nations were at peace. God came when the heavens were unsteady and prisoners cried out for release. God did not wait for the perfect time. God came when the need was deep and great. God dined with sinners in all their grime, turned water into wine. God did not wait till hearts were pure. In joy, God came to a tarnished world of sin and doubt, to a world like ours, of anguished shame. God came, and God's light would not go out. God came to a world which did not mesh, to heal its tangles, shield its scorn. In the mystery of the Word made flesh, the maker of the stars was born. We cannot wait till the world is sane to raise our songs with joyful voice, for to share our grief, to touch our pain, God came with love. Rejoice, rejoice. Let us rejoice this day and always, for God has come among us. Amen.